Hello and good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, we're going to give it a couple of minutes here to let people kind of roll in.
And we'll By the way, I love that music.
Wasn't that fun? I've been learning. I've been learning how to do things.
It was very medieval,
right? It was very queenly.
You know, like it should be playing, in the court of a king,
right?
Or a queen,
right? Or a queen. Get
queen.
It? That's why I did that.
I have to tell you, I absolutely love your crowns.
Oh, thank you. I do too, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
they are. I've had a couple of people that are actually, unfortunately, in the TikTok psychic community. They're like, I don't know why she has to wear crowns. I'm like,
because I'm a queen.
And it's not that I have to. I just do because I love them. Love them. Good morning on TikTok. Good morning. Good morning. Now, are you streaming live on your TikTok also?
I am streaming live on my TikTok. I have the sound off, so that there's no disturbances. But I was live last night. I was live the night before. I was, drumming up support for today's show.
Yay!
I'm so excited about it. There were so many likes on the posts, and and surprisingly, like over 5,000 views of the post. So
that's amazing, because I got like 200.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I feel like I get thrown into TikTok jail. I will go ahead and I will post something that I think is absolutely amazing, and I get like 80 views on it, and I won't get more than 200. So, and then, you can, like, if something is really important, you can promote it. But I think that in itself can become so addictive, because you'll suddenly have all of these views and you'll be like, oh my goodness. Really, it's just them pushing you. And it doesn't mean that people are watching the whole video. Mm-hmm. It's just for views. I think that one of the, and it was when I first started, one of the most views I received on a video was almost 400,000 views and several thousand comments. And it's because what I had said, some people really didn't agree with.
Right. It's the controversy that gets the views, I'm telling you.
Yes. And they came at me in the craziest way. And I actually ended up, I was trying to respond to everybody. And then, like, what am I doing?
Right.
What am I doing? I'm just going to leave this alone, And what's funny is the video was about the fact that there was no hell.
And so that's how you get views. You just occasionally just say something that's going to upset a whole community. And then you're going to get views.
And my question is, and they see, like, it's very human to want to see people punished that have hurt you. Right. I hate that we say that it's, it's human, to want to see people punished.
Correct.
And I'm like, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there's no punishment on the other side. There is healing on the other side for those who have suffered, terrible things or even lived a horrible life themselves. That puts a fracture in the soul, know. And so yes, everybody crosses. Okay. So when they get there, they go to the halls of healing.
Yeah.
And they spend a little time kind of decompressing from, their semester on, Earth school.
Right. Right. And that's exactly how they probably look at it, is like a semester here is like 99 years to us. It's crazy.
Yes.
But this actually is a great conversation to lead into also. First and foremost, welcome, Rebecca. For those of you on TikTok, we're also live on YouTube. Rebecca's also live, Rebecca Healing Medium, on her own channel. If you guys want to pop back and forth, it's fine. Make sure you're tapping the screen over in TikTok and sharing out the live. But we're live on YouTube, Lorenda Carr Medium, as well as Instagram and Facebook. But we've got author Rebecca Rowan. She's my friend. She's a psychic medium and new author. She has inspired me. I'm gonna get my book written just in the right time. But her new book, I've got it right here. I got it just in time too. We've got Healing Becky is her new book, and I'm so excited to have her on and help just kind of give her a boost and all the things. Yeah, so definitely look her up. And if you notice on the bottom of my scroll on the not TikTok, everything not TikTok, you can see where to be able to find her book as well. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this. What made you go, I have an idea, I'm going to write a book?
My mother died. I mean,
okay.
The book is about healing generational trauma. I mean, it is about healing me, obviously healing Becky. But it really talks about familial trauma, and how it is passed forward, we don't even mean to, but we pass it forward. Right. There are patterns, that are built into us through our childhoods, through our experiences, and we can scream to the moon that we will never do that to our children, but we still pass on certain patterns.
Well, and I find that you're not even going to see those patterns until you're already in therapy and you're like, whoa.
Yes.
Oh.
I saw somebody wrote on, it was like a meme that, the boomers said your feelings don't matter, and Gen Z is saying, wow, I can diagnose you with like 100 different issues here. I mean, pardon me.
True. It's true.
So I had such a difficult relationship with my parents. There was, there's a trigger warning on the book because there's a lot of child abuse in the book, a lot of neglect. There is, unfortunately, familial sexual abuse. And I spent much of my adult life just kind of burying all of that, and just trying to live this life. And, I'm sure you read the analogy in the preface.
Yes.
If we look at ourselves as a house and we're taking all of our pains, our hurts, our past traumas, and we're throwing them into our metaphorical basement,
right?
And we're trying to ignore it. But over time, it affects the house. It affects you. It stresses the foundation. It stinks. It smells. It comes up and it affects our adult behaviors. And so I had basically like, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm just going to do this. And I had started therapy in my mid 30s, but I wasn't finding, good therapists and I wasn't revealing a very large part of myself, because how do you go and sit across from a mental health professional and say, well, I see, hear, and speak to the dead, and they're, writing notes that you're having visual and auditory hallucinations.
Oh, oh, you do now.
Oh, you do you? Wow.
That's nice.
Wow.
Yeah, I fired the first therapist that did that face.
Yes. So I had been seeing a therapist and it just, there was no growth. There was no evolution. There was no change. And so I actually started writing years ago as therapy, because the paper didn't judge me. I could write anything on that piece of paper. I also wrote poetry. And, that was very, very healing for me. Sometimes I'd read my poetry back and I go, ooh, that's dark, and then I'd put it in a shoebox and kind of had it under the bed because I was like, that's really dark. One day I will do a book of my poetry. So that'll probably need a trigger warning too. But, my father passed away in 2014 and I made some peace with him, but, I never got to say the hard things to him. And so again, I'm holding all of this in, trying to live my life. And for a while, that really does work. It's like, oh, I'm going to put some Febreze in this room and I'm going to, light some candles and we'll try to open the window in that room and, and function, but you get to a point, and it is on the back of the book, where I was living a life based on survival until survival just wasn't enough.
Right.
And I found an amazing spiritual psychotherapist.
I love that.
And I remember, because, my mother was very ill. My mother always lived with me, and my mother was very ill. And she came to me one day and I knew it, I knew because every time I would look at her chakras, They were so dim except for the solar plexus. And that's where the centers of our will basically lie.
Right.
And I knew that she was willing a broken body to live. And she was doing that for fear of judgment. She was afraid of death because, Catholic, old time Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So she came to me one day and she just looked at me and she goes, I was looking at my face in the mirror and I'm dying. And I remember having this very blank response, which was, yes, you are. And inside I'm going, where the heck are my feelings? Like she was crying and I just went cold. I went blank. But that's a defense mechanism.
I say that's a trauma response, survival response.
Yes.
So many words for that.
So, I found this amazing therapist and started working with her. And she was the first therapist that I'd ever gone to. And by the way, people, please seek mental health help if you need it. There is no shame in that.
None.
Okay. I mean, I am not a licensed therapist. I am a life coach. I'm a spiritual advisor. But even those people, even psychiatrists, therapists, they have therapists too, because they listen to a lot of that all day long. They need to have the ability to purge also.
Correct.
So I found an amazing spiritual psychotherapist, Leslie, beautiful woman, who shared some of her story with me after we'd started to see each other quite constantly. Mm-hmm. I felt every week like I was headed to an emergency room when I was talking to her. But the difference was that she would give me homework.
Yeah.
And she'd say, okay, so this is what I'd like you to work on. And in the beginning, every week was, Rebecca, show yourself some grace. Show yourself some mercy. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I have no idea what that means. What does that mean? Nobody's ever shown me grace. Nobody's ever shown me mercy. I don't know how to do that.
And that's so true. Like if that's not been part of your culture and your upbringing and your way of thinking, if you've been in defense mode, there is no grace.
There is no grace. I was my harshest critic. Yeah. And no one could abuse me more than I could abuse myself. I had that voice inside of my head every time I tried to do something that beat the heck out of me. Like, who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? You can't do that. You don't have this gift. You can't. And it was amazing to me that she told me, well, fight that voice. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, when you're about to say something, you're thinking something in your head and it comes back at you, speak out loud. Tell it to shut up.
Well, words have power and intention.
Yes. She said, it's not going to immediately turn off, but it will get quieter and quieter and quieter. Pardon me. It's been raining nonstop and then the sun came out and now it's like allergies so bad.
Yeah.
So I told her I wanted to work on my relationship with my mother because I knew that she was dying. And there was no getting past that.
Right.
I couldn't change it. It was going to happen. So I started to try and talk to my mother. And the hard part was that my mother carried so much shame. My mother did a lot of changing in her adult life, but it didn't change what she did to me when I was a child.
Right.
And I was angry and I was not nice to her. I was demanding answers from her and I wanted her to make confessions to me. And I wanted everything to be validated, and that's not how that works.
It doesn't. It really
And I had to learn to step back and see her as a very broken human, a very fractured soul who was in just as much pain as I was.
Right.
And so my mother and I went through this entire healing process, and it's written all in the book. My mother and I went through this entire healing process. My mother embraced death when it came. And it is in the book, but I will tell you, the day she died was one of the most profound spiritual experiences I have ever had in my life. And that's saying a lot, because I've had some pretty...
Because well, if people don't know, Rebecca is also a professional psychic medium. Like you're natural, like we're all natural born, but like
we are all naturally born.
Yes.
You know, I mean, listen, you could be a naturally born baseball player, but you still got to join Little League as a kid and then work through that until you end up in the majors. Exactly. You know, so, and I've had some really wonderful mentors in my life, you know, and I'm also an extremely curious person. So I was reading and I'm talking to my guides, you know, does this ring true? And, you know, because you can read whatever books you want to read, but that doesn't mean the person's giving you accurate and true information. And not only that, but each of our journeys spiritually is as unique as our DNA.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. People can go through similar things.
Yes.
And be on the similar track.
Yes.
Doesn't mean it's the same. Everyone's is so unique.
Everyone's is so unique. So
let's talk about, I mean, do you want to talk about, you know, as experiencing, you said the day your mom died was very profound.
Well, I'll tell you, the day before was actually really funny. And I'll tell how it was funny. So many people in my family are actually psychic mediums, which is amazing. My family is loaded with them, you know, so when we get together, it can be pretty funny, you know. I mean, when we want to manifest something as a family, we do it as a family. It's crazy. And we're like, here it comes. Great. So the day before, and mind you, you know, I have my mom in my living room in a hospital bed. It was October, but I put a Christmas tree up for her because that was our favorite holiday together. And the mood was very somber. You know, the mood was very, very somber. And I walked into the room at a certain point, and there were so many passed over loved ones in that room that I almost felt like I had to go, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, so I could get over to my mom. You know, there were so many. And my sister came to see my mother. I went to the front door. I let her in. We walked into the room together. She looks at me. She goes, wow. She goes, a lot of people here, kind of like a party. Kind of like a party.
Like a party. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And, you know, and meanwhile, my mother's completely unresponsive and we're just around her bedside. And she actually had a surge a few days before, which is in the book. And I'm not going to talk about it because I will cry.
Okay.
So
people have to buy the book.
Yes. But that night, you know, I hadn't been sleeping. It's amazing that when you're sitting vigil with somebody who is, you know, on the verge of exiting, you know, you sit vigil because there was this fear in me. Like, I didn't want to miss it. Like I wanted to be with her, you know, when she exited. And my brother-in-law said, you're exhausted, go to bed. If anything starts to change, I will wake you up. And he had medical training. I have past medical training. I actually was a paramedic for years. And I also worked hospice very briefly because I took that training and I worked in the medical field. But I went to bed and I fell into this like really deep sleep. And I was woken by my mother's voice. And I opened my eyes and she was standing by the side of the bed and began to talk to me and give me encouragement, instruction for the future. And suddenly I said, oh my God, she died.
Right.
And I jumped up and I'm looking for my glasses, you know, and I ran down the stairs expecting her to be dead. And she wasn't. She was still breathing. Now, here's something that not a lot of people understand. When people are in the dying process, or even when they're in comas, they have one foot in this world and one foot in the next. Yes. And my mother had something to say to me. Yeah. And so she literally gave me that message. I run downstairs and I'm looking around the room, and there were only two souls in that room. Her mother and her father. The night before, it had been so crowded. And now I walked into this room and it was so intimate. And at one point, her mother's soul moved away and it was just her father. And I turned to my brother-in-law because now I'm taking her blood pressure. I'm checking her O2 sats. They weren't even reading. She barely had a blood pressure. And I turned to my brother-in-law and I said, you need to wake my sister like now. And the words were like hanging in the air like a bubble. And everybody in my family started to come down from their rooms. Everyone woke up. Everyone knew it was time.
Wow.
And she passed. And I watched the light of her spirit lift up out of her body and go with her dad. But, she used to, when she was starting the dying process, she'd go, Becky, do you see them? Do you see them? And I'm like, yeah, I see them. And meanwhile, the nurses would be like, it's okay, Ada, you're all right. And I'm like, she's fine. She's seeing the people that are there.
Right.
So, but it was such a profound experience. And I say that it was one of the best and the worst moments of my life.
Yeah.
To be with this amazing soul as she exited and went home. And, and so after my mother passed, it's really funny, you're holding yourself together. And I think you're running on adrenaline,
Right. Well, and plus, do you think that your nursing back or your healthcare background allows you to be able to just go, oh, okay, I got to go into this mode too?
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't sleeping. I actually wasn't eating because she wasn't eating. I really wasn't taking care of myself. Right. And she passed in October of 2020. And I barely remember like November and December. And there are photographs of me. At Christmas, I decorated the whole house. I had a whole house full of people for Christmas Eve. And here's me in these photos, and I'm smiling and everything. And January hit and I crashed.
That makes sense, though.
I crashed. I completely crashed. And I went into a state where I was either sleeping all day or I had horrible insomnia or, and so I went back into therapy and started working again with my therapist. And I went through this massive healing process. And one day I was sitting on my deck and I had wanted to write about this, but I didn't know if I was strong enough to do it.
Right.
And I was sitting on my deck and I was meditating and I was listening to music, and Spirit literally said, I want to show you something, and pulled me straight out of my body. And before I knew what was happening, I literally was right over the earth. And did you know that the earth has a heartbeat?
Oh, yes.
Did you know that the earth breathes?
It was alive as we are.
Oh my gosh. And Spirit actually because it's wordless, right? And I'm saying Spirit had words, but it really was wordless. It was just instant.
It was feel
into my soul. And Spirit showed me all of humanity. And I could see every living inhabitant of this planet. And we were all connected by golden threads. And I could see our spirit teams around each individual, how they guided us, how they were always trying to talk to us, how, they were always trying to communicate with us. And I saw other humans trying to help other humans. But Spirit said, you all feel so alone. You all feel so disconnected, like it's you against the world. And I didn't even have to verbalize them because the answers came instantly.
Yeah.
It was an instant answer. And it was that the greatest driving force in this entire universe is love and the experiences of love, and the funny thing is when Spirit, and I'm not going to talk about the whole thing because it is in the book, when I was dropped back into this mortal coil, 4 hours, it was like being on LSD. I've never taken LSD, but I'm assuming this is probably what it's like. I could see energetic pulses around every living thing, including trees, grass. I would look into the woods behind my house. I could feel the animals back there.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And I sat down and I literally wrote the first sentence. And it was, how long has she been breathing like that? And It was not an overnight, like, oh, I sat at my computer and I was typing away. And
yeah, this has been a journey for you.
this
I
has been a
remember,
journey
when you were first starting to talk about doing the book.
Because when I first started writing it, you know, some of it came out pretty fast, but then I would get to points where I had to talk about the abuse and the trauma, and I would have to walk away. I'd have to walk away. I would, and some, you know, maybe for a couple hours, maybe for a few days, maybe for a few months, as I literally would call Leslie up and go, I'm not processing this very well.
Right. Well, and it's things that you think that you've processed, you think that you've gone through and you've dealt with. I mean, this is at the risk of sounding like I'm talking about all about me. I get it, because you and I have talked about this, where I've started my book. I started my book 1.5 years ago, and I keep getting to points where I'm like, ooh, I can't.
You need a break. This is
I step back, because it is soul cleansing. It is, you're going through the house of a hoarder and digging out the stuff and figuring out and trying to navigate what the hoarder is trying to keep and why.
Yes.
And what in the world? It doesn't make any sense to anybody else looking in. But why is that there? And why are they so desperate to hang on to it? And that's how it feels like when you're cleaning out your house, when you're processing all this. You get to that one garbage bag and you pull out the picture and you're like, whoo, well, that was triggering.
You know, what's worse is some of those bags that have been there for years, you know, they're gross.
They're gross.
Wants to touch that.
And
you know?
There's no point to keeping it. There's literally no point. It's not going to benefit you in any way. It's not going to you can't even like send it to Goodwill to benefit somebody else. You've got to get rid of it. But how do you do that? If you are a true hoarder, that bag has life to it that's valuable.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes who wants to take something out of the basement that we're ashamed of? What if somebody sees me?
Right.
I don't want to be perceived. You know, if people knew what happened to me,
Molly,
will they judge me? You know, and that's the shame, right? That's the shame that doesn't even belong to us.
I think even further, because again, you and I have kind of talked about, we've got some similar things that have happened in our life. If I put that book out there and I've got my name on it, how many people are going to look to my family for further answers?
It's funny that you say that.
And my family's not on board with this.
Yes. It's funny that you say that, because one of my kids, when one of the relatives wrote something kind of nasty on my Facebook post, one of my kids actually started to comment on it. And I said, stop, remove that. That's not your fight. You know, that's not your fight. That's for me to deal with. You know, and bless my kids, they wanted to defend.
Yeah, they want to defend you.
Yeah, they want to protect me. My kids were amazing.
Where I will say, my kids, they love me, but there's absolutely no way they'll come to my defense in any way, shape, or form.
Oh,
no, that's just not that's not who they are. They'll be like, well, she can drown on that ship, but I'm pretty sure she got a good insurance policy. I don't know.
So, you know, I'm going to talk about really quickly, you know, in any kind of generational trauma, there are energy signatures. Yes. Okay. And, you know, the familial, and I'm just going to use the word, there was a lot of incest in my family, you know.
Same.
But it didn't just happen in my generation. It happened in the previous and the previous and the previous.
Yeah.
Okay. I made a choice that it stopped in my generation. Okay. But there are other things that actually energetically were passed forward. Okay. So this is meat, not milk, if you understand what that means. But time is irrelevant. Okay.
Correct.
We are living these multiple lives. We use the term past life. It's all
simultaneous.
It's all simultaneous. And so we have the ability energetically to go back and heal things and to go forward and heal things, you know. And the thing is that when I was very deep into my own healing journey, I realized that the energetic signatures that had been passed forward to my children, I had to deal with, because some of it was mine that I did. Some of it wasn't. Some of it just was, wow, what is this in our blood?
Right.
But it was one of the hardest things to then do healing with my children, and to do it individually, not even as a group. And so with each child, I had to make amends, and I had to suffer the wrath of their anger, which was deserved. Okay. I deserved that, and I took it and I owned it, because if I didn't, then I was invalidating their experiences and their feelings. And here we are, and we're years and years into this, and I have a daughter that I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, and she's back in my life, and we're just at the start of that journey together. And here I am, and I'm getting punched and kicked, and,
right.
And I'll take it. But even with the other kids, it got to a point where it's like, okay, you're trying to punish a woman who doesn't exist anymore. Who I was at 25,
yes,
is not who I am at 53.
Correct. And I think that's where you want to give them that space. You want to give them that opportunity to say what they need to say, to find, and then also allow yourself to make those apologies for who you used to be. But there has to be a point where you have to set the boundary and go, okay, here we are now. You've said what you need to say. I've apologized, but also I'm no longer that person. There has to be a choice to make the transition to see the person you are now. I am not the person that gave birth to my oldest at 21 years old at 53.
That's right.
That's like a whole
different person. She's a stranger. Like I don't even know her.
Past lives. How many lives do we live within a lifetime? Yes. Just that. I mean, so I look at even my mom, who for years in case you're watching, Mom, I love you. But how much anger I held on and blamed my mom. But I look at her now and I'm like, holy crap. Like, she was living a human life. She was also dealing with her own trauma. She was dealing with the fact that, like, my dad was predatory and that thus I was born. And her parents had their own trauma, their own situation. And going further back, I'm like, this poor woman had no chance. Yes. And I, as the child, had to find empathy in a whole new way. But it's hard for kids, I think, to do that, especially in culture. Yes. The way it is now, cancel culture is a hardcore thing here.
It truly is.
Where it's like, oh, well, I don't like what you think anymore. I don't like who you voted for, so we're done. Which, that's a whole other deep dive. But, like, without any grace for exactly seeing why a person got to where they are. But the fact is, I did do the work. You've done the work. You and your mom, you did your best to try to make things right. Oh, yeah. So hopefully your kids now, obviously, if they're going to go on social media and be like, oh, you want to come down? I'm going to come for her. I'll take, but that's a good place to be in, because that means the healing, you truly have broken those generational traumas.
I have my youngest daughter. So, I was a very young mother. Okay. I was 17 when I had my oldest. By the time I was 22, I had 4 children. So let's do the math there. Okay. Because in like 5.5 years, I had 4 kids.
Yeah.
Then, a number of years later, I was 28. I had my last, so I have 5 children, but I had children during a time where I should have been growing and becoming a person, with an individual personality. And meanwhile, I had to dump my entire youth and focus on being a mother, know, and I was in a bad marriage, and I was in a bad marriage because we were babies. We were babies having babies.
So don't you find that even then you look back at the father of your children and go, whoo, I got to give some grace and space for that. Listen,
because I got to come together. I had a conversation with him like, look, the book's coming out. You're really bad. You're really bad in the book. But, years later, and I've known this man since 1988. I was 16 years old when I met him, and he's one of my dearest friends, because who he was when he committed those acts and he made those life choices is not who he is today, and people want to know, like, well, how can you forgive some people and not forgive others? And the answer is, well, if I go to you and you've hurt me, you've done this, I speak my truth to you, and you look at me and you say, I'm so sorry, I'm doing the work, I've done the work, or whatever, beautiful. Then I'm going to give you my forgiveness. I might not have you in my life, maybe I need that distance. You have to be at arm's length, but I'm not going to hold on to that anymore. And I wish you the best,
Right.
But then there are people, and actually this is in the book, one of my relatives, and you hurt me, you did this. Oh, get over yourself. Get over yourself.
Right.
Like I did that, but get over yourself. No growth, no change, no remorse, no regret. Well, now you're dead to me. I'm sorry. And right. I do that because I have a right to fiercely protect my peace. I was doing a live stream once, and it's actually one of the pinned videos on my TikTok. A girl had asked, how do I forgive my stepmother? And, intuitively, I knew that this was not somebody that deserved her forgiveness. Zero regret, zero remorse.
Right.
And I said, who says you have to? Who says you have to?
Yeah, there's no rule that you have to.
I mean, are family members trying, I stopped talking to so many family members, and I would have other family members come to me and say, can't you just, for the sake of the family, just kind of deal
with it? The family deal with it.
Like we want to have a Christmas party and we can't invite the both of you. It'll be awkward.
Awkward. We'll ruin everything for everybody.
Yes. Well, then fine. I'm not coming. I don't care.
That's honestly, that's where I am. I'm like, cool.
Yes. Well, we're Gen X, right? And I also think that this comes with age, where you get to a point where I'm not giving this my energy. I choose not to. This right. does not affect me. Like if this had happened 10 or even 20, 30 years ago, I would have been up in arms, but I pick and choose my battles very specifically now.
Yep.
Because I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I don't want to.
No. And I tell my husband all the time, he'll get all worked up over like the pacer game and the choices and that. He'll rah, rah. I'm like, dude, you only get so many heartbeats. Mm-hmm. Use them wisely, because we're on the other side of that. we're on the other side of the hump here. So you're in the minority of the heartbeats versus the majority of the heartbeats left. So you might want to choose your heartbeats wisely. Where do you spend that energy? And he'll be like, whatever.
Well, that's like, my kids are like, what do you want for your birthday? And I'm like, experiences. Oh, don't you dare buy me clothes or jewelry or anything like that. Get me a ticket to a concert. Take me on a trip. Give me experiences, something I've never done before.
Even just take me to lunch. Let's go hang out. Let's
go spend some time.
You spend time. And isn't it funny how you do get to an age where that's something. Even in my mediumship practice, we get that message a lot from spirit. Yes. Spend time, experiences. You can't take things with you, but you take every single experience, every choice you make, every interaction comes with you.
I tried to, before my father passed away, my dad was a hoarder, not like a dirty cups hoarder. He hoarded motorcycles and motorcycle parts and years and years and years. And I would say to him, Dad, this one motorcycle is worth like 20 grand. Why don't we sell this? And you can take mommy to, Europe or whatever, but he hung on to things. And I remember saying this to him, and it's kind of, we use our gallows humor, because I said it to him like a week before he died, and I said, Daddy, I have never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. You cannot take it with you.
I am totally using that. I'm totally using that.
Never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse.
It's true.
You know,
you can't take all that with you.
I mean, and I've said this to my kids. I literally go through my belongings twice a year. Does this spark joy? Literally, or why did I buy this dress? It's kind of ugly. I'm going to give it to somebody who could use it. Somebody who doesn't think it's ugly. Because when my father died, we had to go through multiple storage units. Believe it or not, my dad lived in Indiana for a while.
Oh, really?
My sister had to go to Indiana to go through his storage units, and they were filled with junk that had been eaten away by mice. He had been paying for storage units in Indiana for like 10 years, and there was nothing worth a thing in there,
Right. And that's how it was with my grandparents too. I think it's a generational thing, honestly, because I think your parents and my parents are right around the same, or your parents and my grandparents are right around the same age.
Well, my father was silent generation. My mother was a boomer.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
My parents had me young. We're all really, really young. So yes, I'm Gen X, but I had a boomer mom,
Okay. All right. Well, I had, my grandparents were silent generation, both of them, and both lived through the Depression. Like they're just something, like they kept everything. My grandpa didn't care so much, but he knew what made his wife happy. So he just let it happen.
So, well, I just never want to do that to my kids, because listen, I know this. This is why I'm always talking about the importance of the relationship we hold with ourselves, because our parents grow old and pass away. Our children grow up and leave us. But in the end, it's always us. That's why you have to foster that relationship that you have with yourself.
Because it might be all you have is yourself.
That's right. And I know one day I won't be here, and my kids are going to have to go through my stuff, and am I going to leave them a mess? Like when my mother knew that she was dying, she started to give away her belongings, because she said, I'm not going to write it down on a piece of paper like you get this ring and you get that and you get this. She goes, let them have it now, and I can give it to them, and it'll make them happy.
And she can witness seeing them enjoy those things.
Yes. The funny thing is, I grew up in such abject poverty, and I came from two parents who grew up in such abject poverty that I almost fell into that pattern when I was younger. Like, oh, I can't get rid of this piece of candy. I don't know. I should hold on to this. Like, what if I don't have money to buy another one? And, and it really was an energetic signature that was pushed forward in fear, when we talk about manifestation, we talk about power in words, power in emotions, and the signatures that they leave, the impressions that they can leave. It is amazing how you can think something is so small, but it could turn into something so horrible. But you can also think something is so small and it could turn into something so amazing. Mm-hmm. Where do we focus our thoughts? Where do we focus our thoughts? Are we constantly pulled towards the negative? Can we pivot our way of thinking ever so slowly? Nobody's going to say you're going to make a choice one day like, I'm not going to focus. So whoop, I've done a 180 and now I'm Miss Sunshine. It's not how that works. It's kind of like we're going to just swing with this, and nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Listen, I have the mouth of a sailor. I am one of the most.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah. That people who have those kinds of mouths are actually quite intelligent.
We are geniuses.
That's right. So, I am so patient. I will allow so much, but if you push me too far, I'm an Aquarian. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's it.
No
more. Never again. So, but this is life. This is life. We, here we have our platforms, right? We're psychics, we're mediums, we're empaths, we're healers, we function in so many of the clairs, and we've worked hard to, to build these skills, because we call them gifts. They are skills that everybody possesses, but not everybody is called to have platforms the way we do, or work in certain fields. But let me tell you something, having the ability to peek in to the other side helps me in my daily life. Okay.
It really does.
Helps me in my daily life, listening to everything. I went live last night, and I thought I was going live to promote this morning, do you know that when I logged on to TikTok, the overwhelming feeling of fear that was happening last night amongst people, scared for the country and the globe and all this other stuff, and and I took a couple of breaths, and I asked my guides, help me to be a comfort, and now here I am, and I'm talking to all these people. But I've done that in a grocery store. I've done that at my kids' school. I've done that everywhere, Help me to be helpful.
Yeah.
I'm always wanting to give back. I'm not a gatekeeper. I don't hold things, It's like, oh, I've got this knowledge and I'm not telling anybody,
Right.
It is amazing, that you could be walking through, and it's not like, and I always say, you really need to ask permission when you're going to read somebody, but as empaths, we read emotion also, and I've walked into public places and knew, because I was directed and felt that, just to be a little bit kinder to the cashier because she's having a shit day.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with me.
She had to deal with that day too, know?
And it had nothing to do with me giving her a message. It had nothing to do with a loved one coming through. It was just, this person needs a little ounce of kindness. Yeah. Just a little ounce of kindness, or even protective, like, what? Don't park here. Go park somewhere else. And it may sound stupid because I've had really amazing, massive things happen to me, but I take such joy in the little things, just in the little things.
But don't you find as a reader, though, the things that come into you that might be little to someone else might be huge. So I feel like as a psychic medium, because of reading other people, because of seeing through other people's experiences, we do find a lot more value in those little things.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That was rambling thought.
You know what? That's okay. Because sometimes maybe somebody's listening that needed to hear that.
Yeah, maybe.
I think, and you and I touched on this very, very briefly, the whole imposter syndrome, and how much that holds us back as psychics, as mediums, because we will sometimes get something and go, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to say that. Like, is that just coming from me? Like, that sounds really dumb. And to be able to move past and turn to the person who's sitting for the reading and go, and it's actually, I've learned not to even say, this may sound stupid, because then again, that's also me putting myself down and not
and creating a negative energy, right?
Yeah, I might say, this is a little strange to me. However, they're showing me like a picture of a banana with some sunglasses on, and that's actually from a reading. Oh my gosh. They're showing me like a banana with sunglasses on, and this woman started to cry.
Oh my God. Well, you got them when they start crying.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I'm sorry. You ever on TikTok and you have to do that. Stupid things up?
Yep.
When did they start doing that?
Oh, I know why. Because people used to go live and they would just sleep.
Running.
Yeah, and they would just sleep. And so, yeah, it was weird. So then they started doing that.
Who watches people sleep? That's strange. You know who I don't get, when people are in front of the little microphone and they've got like a tissue and they're just going like this.
Oh, the ASMR.
And I'm like, no, my ADHD, that's grating against my skull. No. So that's good. I fully embrace my ADHD now.
I do too.
my neurodivergency, and we make a joke in my family. We're like, listen, we all have a touch of the tism. We're fine,
Right. So let's really quick. So those of you who are just joining in, I'm seeing a lot of people jumping in here on TikTok. So on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, we've got Rebecca Rowan, author of brand new book, Healing Becky. You can get it on Amazon. Check it out. Da-na-na-na. And there is a trigger warning because it's a pretty deep, intense book. However, and I just received my copy the other day, so I have not gotten all the way through it. I put it down when I started crying at the bar. What I'm waiting for before I went to.
Let me ask you, what made you cry?
Just reading how, just that first chapter when you're talking about when your mom came to you and said, I'm dying. And you were like, yeah, you are. And then the compassion with the doctor, like when you guys went and talked to the doctor and it's just, I have
to tell you, her doctor was, I will never forget that man. I will never forget that man.
I mean, it sounds like from what I read in the book, he was extremely compassionate, and really embraced her concerns and said, and respected her wishes of, if this is this is inevitable.
Yeah.
When you are ready, let me know. And we're going to make this as comfortable and as peaceful as possible. And it sounds like he was very, very direct in how it was going to happen. And the fact that he just told her, if I was going to go anyway, this is the way I would go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just really took the time with her. There was no pressure to, okay, well, I got things to do. Or can we wrap this up? There was no, you had made the point that he was very compassionate and very,
he was an amazing human being. And I am so grateful that, in whatever contract we signed together, he was there.
He was there.
Because he made such an overwhelming moment in time bearable because of how compassionate he was.
Well, and there's this fear. I mean, I know that, you and your mom worked all these things out, like you worked a lot of the stuff out. You worked together to resolve things before she passed, or to come to an understanding, and you guys were in a good place. But there's still, again, Catholic guilt. There's still that fear of what we talked about before we ever logged on, the fear of hell. And what if I didn't do enough? Is it okay for me to go? Is there any, there's that fear. And as we, as practitioners, as the daughters, as the humans, having to watch someone be afraid of letting go. Like your mom was in a position where she knew it was inevitable, but was she okay with whatever happens?
Yeah.
Once
you'll
read
that in the book.
I know.
Okay. So, and it was, I mean, listen, it wasn't like all, sunshine and rainbows and, oh, mom and I love each other now and it's all good. There was so much pain in that healing process, and so much understanding. There came a moment in time where my mother, my eyes, how I saw her changed completely. And there came a point where I didn't need her to apologize anymore. I didn't need any of that,
Right.
And I will say this, because even today I'll talk about her and it just tears at me. When my mother passed, she passed as one of the most precious people in my life.
And that I love that for you.
Yeah.
And for
funny, because, in the beginning of the book, I'm talking about, when I start to talk about my mother in the past, it's like I'm ripping her to pieces, because that's how I perceived her, and then the journey that we took, and anybody who reads the book and they're going to feel like, because it's a roller coaster.
Right.
It's a roller coaster. And it doesn't always end well, and I want to say this, I'm so grateful for how things ended with my mom. I am so grateful. By the way, my mom is one of my guides now.
I was
She
gonna say, she's with you a lot. She helped you with this book. She's helped you from the other side along the way.
Yeah. And you know what? She bounces around to my kids, which I love, which I love. But it doesn't always end like that. And, there will be another book, by the way, because I just touched on the journey with my children, but I know that it has to be spoken about more.
Yeah.
And something actually happened last year that, so, I am no longer with the father of my children, but we are very dear friends.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was dying, and I ended up taking care of his mother. And this was a woman who tormented me when I was younger. She was cruel. She had no relationship with my children because they were a part of me, and she hated me so much. And the only sin I had committed was I stole her baby. I know. So let's not even go there. It's pretty deep.
It's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other bag of worms.
Right.
But in taking care of her, she, in the beginning of me taking care of her, and I took care of her in hospice for about 6 weeks. And she finally got to the point where she couldn't walk. And, I literally picked her up like a baby because she only weighed 70 pounds. And I carried her up a flight of stairs to give her a bath. And as I took her out of the bath and I had her seated and I was drying her body, I was on my knees in front of her. And she leaned down and she kissed my forehead. And I looked up at her and she said, "I was so mean to you. Why are you taking care of me? I don't deserve this." And I said, "Everyone deserves dignity."
Yep.
But the thing is, you want to talk about the Catholic fear of hell? She knew what she'd done to everybody. I have been at the bedside of many who have passed. And when somebody's good because they will just go.
I'll just go.
She was not going. And
Right.
when I say that every hospice nurse that came in on the daily would look at me and go, I don't know how. I don't know how this is happening. And she wasn't peaceful. There was nothing peaceful about this. And, I was alone with her when she passed because everybody had left and it was kind of late. And I knew that the hospice nurse was coming to check on her because I don't know how she was still alive. Her O2 saturations were like 30, I mean, yeah. And it was not a nice ending moment. Okay. Physically, let me say this. It was not a nice ending physically. Actually, it traumatized me to watch. Okay.
I can't imagine.
But I watched her exit. Okay. And be greeted. Mm-hmm. And the feeling immediately was, what was I afraid of? Why was I holding on so hard?
Right.
Why was I holding on so hard? And so, this is why, religious trauma is definitely a thing.
Oh, it is.
As
practitioners, we see it all the time.
All the time. I mean, listen, I spent years as an evangelical Christian. I was actually studying to be a minister, and it's something in it did not sit right with me for the longest time because I saw evidence to the contrary. Like no one group of people holds all the answers. Right. And what I recognized, and when I did leave that church, I actually would visit different houses of worship, and you felt spirit everywhere. And what I came to learn, and then I started to study this, were the universal truths that spanned every religion. Okay. Yep. There are absolute universal truths. I mentioned this, I think, when you had joined my live, the universalist law of mentalism, which is as within, so without.
Yep.
Well, the Christians have a scripture, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, so, or the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Jesus said that. No, Buddha said it 2,000 years before Jesus. It's a universal law, you know? I mean, there's truth is truth, and it does not age or wither away. It stands solid in itself for eternity, even though eternity is not really a thing.
Right.
But it loses none of its power. Okay. It loses none of its power. So, you know, I mean, and that in itself was a journey. And somebody's like, oh, you got to write a book about just that. And I'm like, people are going to get to the point. I'm like, look, if I write all these books, people are going to think, did she really go through all of that? You know, I mean, I had a friend say to me once, you know, it seems a little statistically impossible that all of these things happen to you. And I'm like, look, you can't make this crap up. If I could, I would write Spanish novellas, you know, where the only thing I was missing in my own story was an evil twin and a brain tumor. You know, I mean, you can't make this up. But I also, you made a comment. This is the truth. How many lifetimes are we living just in this incarnation? We're 53 years old. Okay. We are 53 years old. That's a lot of time.
It is a lot of time.
It is a tremendous amount of time for a lot of things to happen when you consider, you know, like I tell people, you want to understand it, close your eyes and do a moment of silence for 60 seconds. How does that feel? Now, wash some dishes. How quickly did 60 seconds go? You know, but 53 years and all the experiences that we can have in that amount of time, for good or bad.
Right.
You know, so yes, my darling, it's possible. Can't make it up.
Nope.
So I have to say, I almost wanted to join you, but then I had something to do with your trance mediumship classes because I had a mentor who just briefly, and I do trance mediumship, which, you know, I haven't done it in a while because you know, nobody's really asked me to. But it's always amazing to get new perspectives on things. And, but I wanted to ask you, and I know I'm your guest, but what classes do you teach?
I will teach when my schedule allows it. And that's on my list of things to work on today. I love to teach classes. It's just my availability. My availability is not when everybody else is available, because I teach nights for dance. And then I have a lot of people on the West Coast that want to take classes, but that means I'm teaching class at 10 o'clock at night just to accommodate their work schedules. So that's not working out either.
Yeah.
I have no weekends. Anyway, when I do teach classes, I'll teach. My favorite class to teach is Spirit Guides 101. I love Spirit Guides 101 because, and I teach it from the spiritualist perspective, understanding that, you know, a spiritualist will teach, you know, you've got a joy guide, a philosopher guide, your alchemist, your protector, and a master teacher. The first four are your core guides, and you learn how. And so I teach people how to identify them, how to start meditating with them and utilizing them in your life, what the idea behind, like, why do we have this spirit team that's just for us, the ones that we can call in, they're helping us. So I love teaching Spirit Guides 101 and learning the language of your guides, which is like a part 2 to Spirit Guides 101.
I think if that is, because I also teach an introductory class like that, which I love, because, you know, towards the end of the class, we do a meditation where we're calling them forward.
Oh yeah. That's part of the class.
And very slowly, you know, we're asking the rest of them to stay back so they can come forward one at a time, so that, you know, it's almost like putting a coat on, right? How does this feel?
How does that feel? Exactly.
So that you can recognize their energy when they're trying to communicate with you. But I personally believe if that is the only class you can teach to people, if that's the only thing that you can teach to people, that is a foundation. That is a very deep foundation that will allow others to walk forward in that, you know, in that search. Right. You know, for growth and evolution. Right. So I love that. One of
my goals this summer is to actually just record that class and be able to like click to sell, so people can take it whenever they want.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not interactive, unfortunately. And that's one thing I will say I like about my classes that I teach is they are very interactive, very participatory, but not everybody has the time and not everybody feels comfortable in that platform. So that's one of my goals, is to teach that. And then also not just who are your guides, which is Spirit Guides 101, but the part 2, the learning language of your guides is learning how to communicate with them and to set up those pathways of communication with each of those guides and give tools to the person taking the class. Yes. And then now last night I taught Trance, Intro to Trance Mediumship. And I've only taught that class one other time in person. That was in Akron, Ohio in March. And again, imposter syndrome. So I come in going, but I'm not certified trance medium. I don't do seances, but man, I'm really good at trance. I'm really good. I understand because I had a great mentor. I've taken a ton of classes on it. I know how to do that. So if people want that, why not teach them? So yeah. I had that class last night, and that was the first time I've taught it in Zoom format, online format. And I got to plan better on the timing because it took longer. It went overtime, which anybody who's taken my classes understands that's a given. That my classes always run too long. I tell people like, good, you're getting your money's worth and then some. But 100% connection. Every single person that came in was able to do trance mediumship, and Spirit was absolutely amazing with their messages. So I'll be doing more of that. I do love teaching that, but I also teach occasionally, like a couple times a year. I'll do like a tarot 101 because I'm a master level tarot reader. What's the other? And then channeled writing.
Yes.
That's another inspirational work. So just understand the differences between channeling and trance, and and even mediumship, mental mediumship, understanding the different layers.
So, I was teaching classes, which I want to get back to teaching these classes. But like you, I also want to, record certain classes, certain what I consider foundationary classes. Right. So that, because also, I have a lot of followers that are in Europe. And so, time differences and everything. By the way, the whole Zoom thing, use Google Meet. There's no time limit. And you can have up to 300 people in the room. Wow. So, but, my first class, who is spirit? Who is spirit? Because that's general information. But I actually at one point was teaching classes about past life. And not really doing a tremendous past life regression, but in the meditation, regressing them back to the womb and then to the garden. Wow. And I love visiting the garden, and now I can get there like this, when I was first learning, it was like, all right, I'm 4. Okay, I'm 3. Like I couldn't get back to the womb, Mm-hmm. First time I got back to the womb, I was like, ooh. It was the craziest thing. But to go to the garden and see all the doors, and then what are you led to? Mm-hmm. Which door you led to? And I always joke, when I was being taught, and the first time my mentor regressed me back to the garden, she said, whatever you're feeling, that's the door you can go to. And the door that I was attracted to wasn't even a door. It was an animal skin.
Oh, wow.
That I pushed aside. And when I stepped out into this life, I had physical sensation. I had so many physical sensations. It was weird. It was like being in virtual reality. Okay. And I was in a bad mood. I was angry. I was watching, she didn't have a name. I was watching my woman cooking food for me. Okay. Wow. And I was in a bad mood because I'd been hunting all day and I hadn't killed anything. Okay. And so she didn't deserve my wrath. I really was just mad at myself.
Right.
And I'm sitting on a rock in a valley. And I'm sitting on a rock in a valley. and my testicles are cold because I'm sitting on a cold rock. Okay. That's how it was crazy. It was so crazy.
Right.
But I've learned that when I will enter a door, the first thing I do is I look at my feet to look at what kind of shoes I'm wearing.
Yeah. When I do past life regression, that's what when I land people where they are, wherever they land, I tell them to look down at their feet. What are they standing on? What are on your feet?
Yes.
Look at your hands.
Yes.
What are you wearing? And take it upward and then outward more. So outward. It's like, first thing I ask, are you male or female?
Mm-hmm.
Are you young or old? Is your body healthy? And let's look at your shoes. Where are you standing? Now look up. What do you see? Yes. And get the lay of the land. So
I have to tell you, of everything that I saw in that first trip, right? I always call it, I'm taking my trips to the garden, right? In everything that I experienced in that, the air was the cleanest and crispest air I have ever breathed. It was, I can't even begin to tell you, because the earth was so young. The earth was so young. There was no pollution, And then when I came back into this form, okay, out of that, I was like, oh, my lungs are so heavy. Like, what is this? One of my children, and my kids know I love you all. I love you all, but they joke that I have a favorite. And for Christmas last year, they actually bought her a hat that said Mom's favorite. Okay? Nobody's jealous. It's great. Okay. But my daughter, when I went through one of the doors and I recognized her, and the very short, brief span that we spent together in this one life, and then my guides actually showed me that she could have come back and had another incarnation. She didn't. She waited for me. And so that we could be in this life together.
Wow.
And so I really want to get back into that. Now, I was never certified in that. But, at this point, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it.
Right. Well, it's not a cheap venture. I can tell you that.
I know. And I did have, like I said, some really great mentors. But I have found, and I'm tying this into the book. Mm-hmm. I have found that when I talked about those energetic signatures that come through, over time, generation to generation, from our ancestors and everything, traveling back to the garden, looking into the lives, the incarnations that I've lived, I was able to pick up evidence of what my purpose was in this incarnation.
Right.
And why I chose
this existence.
And the people who have hurt me. And I say that in this flesh, they hurt me, but they came to do that because I wanted to evolve.
Right.
Everyone in our circle, everyone in our circle plays a purpose. We play a purpose. Sometimes we're the hero and sometimes we're the villain.
Sometimes we're the bad guy.
Yeah, sometimes we're the bad guy, And right now we got a lot of bad guys. We got a lot of bad guys, okay, globally. But you know what? As humans, we are beginning to evolve as a whole, okay? And so we need the bad guys to kind of push us forward, which is terrible. I wish that we could learn our lessons, without the pain and the hurt and this,
Right.
But we're in this, Earth is very low vibration, but it's not going to remain that way.
Right.
We are literally, the entire Earth is evolving, and I am so excited that I'm alive during this time. I'm not going to see the complete fruition of it. You and I will not see the complete fruition of it, but our grandchildren will.
I think that if it took 2,000 years for the Piscean age, and we're just now kicking off the Aquarian age, we're going to live many lifetimes of experiencing it, but it's not going to be this one.
It's not going to be this one, but we're at the dawn of it, which is exciting. What I'm talking about, like in general human terms, I could see things getting a lot better by that time. Not perfect, not done. We're always revolving, but kind of better.
But even just look at the difference between, okay, look at our life as Gen Xers right now, what we're seeing versus what we experienced in the 1970s.
Yes.
Look at how different our everything looks, the way we speak to it. When I watch old shows, like, okay, this is a good example. I used to watch, I was obsessed with Bewitched. Funny that I was obsessed with that show of all shows.
I love that. Yeah.
But when I watch old episodes now, I get so angry because, Darren Stevens was supposed to be this great guy and he was better than most of them, but he said horrible things.
And she was submissive to him.
And
she was a powerful witch who could have done anything, and she was submissive to him
because she wanted to live that life, to experience it, which goes back to the analogy what we were just talking about. Sometimes we choose lifetimes, but if she's a witch who's hundreds of years old, she is in her journey of, you know what, maybe this time I'm going to experience what a human housewife would be like.
Yeah.
And then she played the role, but still had her little side gig of doing whatever she needed to do to get things done. Right. But living that life but looking at, the 1970s when that show was out, how different we think as a society, but then also it made me realize how programmed I was, even though that show was so progressive and out there and it talked about, racism and even sexism, like all the things that show addressed but how we watching that show as kids, I still grew up thinking all these things like that were just normal for me. And then I remember this is something I'm going to have to put in my book is I kind of blame Little House on the Prairie for my thinking about how we as women, what our expectations were. I remember watching an episode where Mary, it was such a sad thing because she was getting married and they were moving and they were just never going to see each other again.
Yes.
That was just you marry him off,
and
then you don't see him ever again. Like once you leave the coop, that's just it, and that's what women did.
Do you know? It's funny you mentioned there. You mentioned Little House on the Prairie because number one, I love that show. Okay,
I did too. But you look at it, and you're like, whoa! I was raised with that.
Watch it again as an adult because I was flipping through channels one day, and an episode was on. And I was like, oh, I should. And I didn't have time to watch the whole episode. And I'm like, oh, I should watch this again. I started to watch it again. And I realized, I remembered it as like this really wholesome show. It's not. There's so much trauma and tragedy in that show that I was like, oh, wait a minute. This scarred me. And I didn't even realize that this show scarred me. I think that, in the 70s, there were basically two formats for shows, right? Either it was the happy family and, they have all these little minor struggles, but it's all fixed in 30 minutes, I mean, it's fine. But then we had shows like Good Times and, and All in the Family and, and things like that, where it was like, what the heck is, and it was really opposite ends of the spectrum. Or then there was like Wonder Woman. I wanted to be Wonder Woman. I know, Linda Carter, right? But we were, I think that in that time, people were trying to break out of the Leave It to Beaver of the 50s, where it's like, this is America. This is how Americans are. And, and it was ridiculous because none of it was true. It was what they wanted. It was propaganda, I mean, basically in a nutshell, it was like propaganda. This is the American family and we're so wonderful. And then, here come the 60s and we've got, the love generation and where, and everybody's expanding their mind and they're protesting against a war that they don't want to be a part of, and civil rights movements and women's rights movements. And, and so I talk about this all the time. We already fought for those things.
Yeah.
We should not have to fight again. Okay.
But here we are.
When people come onto my lives and they're like, well, what do you see for the future? What do you see for the future? It's not that I don't see the future. Of course I see the future, However, free will is again, one of those universal laws that cannot be broken. Okay. Which means I have free will to be a good person. You have free will to be a jerk. Okay?
Correct.
And your free will can affect my free will.
Mm-hmm.
You can get in a car and drive drunk and kill me. Your free will affected my free will wanting to have this life. Okay. Right. So in looking down roads and, and when I'm doing a personal reading, it looks to me like, tendrils, like branches of a tree. But I know that it all comes down to choice. Okay. So I cannot say with any certainty what will happen. But when I do, but Spirit's great. I call them golden roads. Sometimes there are roads that are highlighted in gold. And I'm like, this is a good road. Like this is the probability of this is really high, but this, like, do you think he'll leave his wife? And no, that road is like really dark. So
there's
it's a bad road.
Right. It's a bad road.
It's a bad road. This road is self-love and growth. And then eventually, you attracting that vibration, that person that vibrates like you do. Right now, this is too low. So people want to know, do I look ahead, for the country's future, for the planet's future? Of course I do. And I'm not even going to talk about it. You know why I'm not going to talk about it? Because choices are still being made. So everything looks like cooked spaghetti. Okay. But I will say the one thing that Spirit started to talk to me about years ago, which was, and having worked in hospice, I always describe it as this. When someone is in the dying process, most of the time they will have something called the surge or the rally, which is right before they die, sometimes hours before they die, sometimes days before they die. They'll suddenly sit up in bed and they'll want to eat something. They're talking. They look like, where did this come from? So much of the old ways is dying. Okay. And this is their last fight. Okay. These are the loud voices because they know they're dying. They know that the hatred, the prejudice, the sexism, the everything, we don't accept that anymore. Okay. So this is their last hurrah, and people are afraid. And I get that you're afraid. But don't feed into that because whatever we feed grows. So don't feed into that. But at the same time, we are birthing something completely new. Okay. We're just entering into the age of Aquarius. And I love the fact that, Pluto is in Aquarius for the first time since the late 1770s, which was a time of revolution.
It was.
Okay? So, but here we are. And anybody, and this, when we are in labor and we get into transition, sorry, I have to drink. Mm-hmm. We start entering transition. And transition is that 7 to 10 centimeters. And we want to give up. We want to quit. All of a sudden, we're like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. This is too hard. But the birth is imminent.
Yeah, it's coming, whether we like it or not.
It's coming. You can do this. You can do this. So as these old ways are dying, we're in labor and we're in transition. Both are very painful, but it's coming. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, it is coming. And I feel honored to see such the transition. And that's what I'm saying. Those of us who are that Generation X, that born in the 70s or late 60s, we're seeing this transition from, even not just revolution, but think about, I was thinking about this last night when I was watching TikTok, just doom scrolling, watching young women in their 20s and 30s doing dances on TikTok while their husband's doing dishes. Let's just in cute little crop tops and tiny shorts, right? I'm thinking, look how far we've come.
Did you see, if you're doom scrolling, did you see the women that are looking to induce their labor and they're sprinting around their yards and their waters are breaking? And I'm thinking, when I was pregnant with my kids, I would never have done anything against doctors' orders or whatever, but but we are so informed today. Like I think about how I used to argue with my parents. They would line up their pills, right? And I go, why are you taking this? Why are you Mom, you sure you need to be taking all these pills? And I would read and everything. Well, the doctor said, the doctor said, the doctor said.
That blind faith.
And they never questioned.
Yeah.
My doctor knows, and I do love my doctor because she knows, that I'm not Googling things, because I've had male doctors go, well, Dr. Google. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I read medical journals and medical studies. Okay. And I know that you want to give me this medication, but I'd like to find an alternative. Give me 3 months to change this. Let's see what my blood work is like in 3 months. My doctor loves me. Okay. Because I'm like, okay, so what can we do about this? But we went from blind obedience to questioning everything, right? And so, husband doing dishes while she's dancing in the kitchen
on TikTok.
In
pajamas.
Like 30 years ago, I'm trying to be quiet doing the dishes because my husband's watching something on TV and I better bring him a cold beer.
Right.
I
mean, that's what I'm saying. To see that evolution while things are in chaos and things are terrible right now, from my perspective and your perspective, we have seen so much growth and evolution. And I remember actually when I was in grade school, they were talking about Rome, and then they talk about America. And I remember getting this weird, what I would now, as a practicing psychic medium, would understand it was a download. Then I was like, why am I thinking this?
Yeah, why is that happening? Yeah.
I kept hearing, you will witness the fall of Rome that you call America. You will witness it. And I was like, that's weird. We're indestructible. Because I live in Indiana. Yeah. I was raised with a certain mentality here. Right. And it's amazing to me that I can see we are now global, because we are globally connected through internet, through technology. And I love it. I'm here for, because it makes me get out of my own way and the things that I was programmed to believe. And there are things that I'll hear and I'll go, oh, that's super uncomfortable. Oh, wait, they're not wrong though. And holy crap, I believed this my whole life. And why was that uncomfortable? Then all of a sudden it creates this whole thing. One of the things that I will say that I'm glad for, and I still struggle with, is the whole concept of you're too loud, you do too much, you're too big of an energy. I'm a Leo. I wanted to be a Broadway star. I wanted to be a movie star. I'm still hoping for something to pan out. It might just be that I'm a YouTube star with 8 watchers. I don't know. I don't know. We're going to see how that pans out. But I remember just yesterday, I drive a bright green car. And for years, people are like, you're too loud. You're too much. You're too much. I would lose friendships because I'm too much. And I've been told that. And even on TikTok, when that stupid other practitioner that I thought was my friend was like, I don't know why she shows up with crowns all the time. She's trying to get attention. It's not even about her. I'm like, you know what? Live out loud. Buy the green car. Wear the crown. Do the things, because you know what? You get one life, and your life is about experiences. And if I can draw attention and then share spirit, bam. If I brought healing to someone because they're like, ooh, that's a pretty crown. Oh, wait, what's she saying? Yeah. If my out loud makes you stand up and say, wait, she is saying something valuable.
I remember people being embarrassed of me because I wouldn't keep my mouth shut. But I had been silenced for so many years that it got to the point where it's like, no. I'm going to speak. I'm not embarrassed of, like when I started to really break out and I'm like, I'm going to get tattoos because I want them, because that's me, like you and your crowns, me and my tattoos, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I went into a store. It was actually Best Buy. I went into Best Buy like a month ago, and there was an old man who was making a young cashier very uncomfortable. Okay, really, really uncomfortable. And he was following her around. She was trying to walk away from him, and he was following her around.
Oh, men are emboldened. They think that they can just like do that.
So now I walk up to the register. She comes to help me, right? And he comes over and he's still talking to her. And I turn and I go, "Excuse me, what is your problem?" She's like 18 years old. What are you, 60 with your balding head and your pants, your flannels tucked into your... And I went off on this man. I'm like, "You're a pervert. You're disgusting. Get away from her. Get away from her right now." And she was like so embarrassed. Okay. And the manager came over. I'm like, "You need to kick this man out of the store. He's bothering your employee. He will not stop." And the guy started running out of the store. And I turned to her and I said, "You hear me and you hear me right now." You know, because she was like, "Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Like, "Don't you apologize."
What are you sorry for?
I said, "Let me tell you something. I grew up in a time where girls kept their mouths shut."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I said, "We didn't want to hurt the feelings of predator men who were coming after us." I said, "If he is bothering you, speak loudly, speak clearly, and draw attention, because he doesn't want the attention drawn onto him." I said, "That's gross." I said, "He's like 40 years older than you.
He could be your grandfather."
Yeah. She goes, "He comes in here all the time. He always bothers me." I said, "I don't think he's coming back now." You know, you're right. So much has changed.
So much has changed. So even though we're not like, it feels like we're going backwards because the powers that be are fighting to hold on by a thread.
Yes.
I'm standing there with the scissors going, ready?
Yeah. You know, I'm not going to get into it because I know that our time is running short too, but I will tell you, we were never actually meant to be run by the masculine here.
I know I wasn't.
We were not.
Which is why I think our childhoods were so uncomfortable, because we knew it wasn't what we were born to do.
No.
And we were meant to live loud. And well, I tell you what, the day I found my voice.
I talk about the patriarchy in my book a little bit because my father was the epitome of the head of the household, the patriarchy, in every single area of our lives. I mean, even what food we ate versus what food he ate, and I remember, and my father was a motorcycle mechanic, my whole life. And I wanted to learn how to work on motorcycles. I would watch my father build motorcycles and I wanted to learn to do that. And his response was always the same. "You're a girl. Girls don't do that. You're going to get married. You're going to have children. You're going to take care of your husband." And I did exactly what my father told me to do.
Right.
And listen, I wouldn't give my children back for the world, but I wanted to be so many things. And people would say, as I'm speaking, people, "Oh, wow, you should have been a doctor. You should have been this." And I'm like, I should have been a great many things.
Right.
I said, but I grew up being told that because of my gender, my life had no value.
Right.
And that goes for any, marginalized minority.
Yes.
Okay. It blows my mind that I have, as a white woman, I have more privilege than a black man.
Yeah.
I mean, the white men still have all the privilege, but when you think about it, and plus I was raised, my father was a racist. My father was a horrible racist. It took me years. And actually, this is a funny story, but not a funny story, to let you know how children are born innocent. Everything that is terrible is a learned behavior. Okay. And I was in kindergarten. I loved my kindergarten teacher. And, we grew up in a very white neighborhood, but I went to a mixed school. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't really been exposed to, African-American children and here's African-American children. We had a Chinese community. We had a Puerto Rican community because I grew up in Brooklyn. Right.
Right.
But my father's Italian, so, and just think any stereotypical Italian, that was my dad, you know? So this little girl took my toy, and I hit her. And my kindergarten teacher came over to me and was like, "What happened, Rebecca? What happened?" And I said, "That little N girl took my toy." And this was my teacher's face. She's like, "Rebecca, we do not say that word." And I'm like, "Why not?"
I hear it every day at my house.
Hear it every day at my house. And then I started spouting other racial epitaphs, about other, and my poor teacher trying to talk to me, but nothing changed because I was still in that environment being taught that. And so, it took me years as an adult to rip the roots of racism out of my brain and my heart, because though I understood, it was still there, it was still there. And I had to work on that, like somebody comes onto the bus and I'm clutching my purse. It was almost like an involuntary thing because that's how deeply that went. So when you look at, because I'm shocked sometimes at the young people that are committing certain crimes, but then I'm like, wow, their upbringing, must have been really terrible. But, what are they being taught? What is their home life like? But everything that is changing, and then, like you said, they're trying to hold on.
Right.
They won't be able to. Is it all going to be peaches and cream? No transition is ever easy, so we're still going to see these things, but the one point that I'm trying to make is to never lose your hope, and understand that you may not be able to control what others are doing, but you can absolutely control who you are.
You can control your own reaction. And one thing going back to like that, even just like the beliefs that we're raised to think, because it's all we know.
Yes.
We are little human regurgitators when it comes to being children. Whatever we hear is is our truth.
Yes.
What I have found is, and I've talked about this a lot before. People oftentimes will not change for fear of dishonoring their parents and their heritage because it invalidates their entire childhood.
That's right.
It invalidates their family if they say, ooh, that's bad. You can't say that. And no, I don't have to vote a certain way. I don't have to believe a certain thing in religion. I don't have to be this following. But if I know what my parents did is so wrong and what they believe is so wrong, then I'm invalidating my parents and my entire existence prior to this moment. And then you have to reconcile every choice you made based in, say, we'll just use racism as an example. You invalidate every judgment, or you bring to the surface, every judgment you personally, and then you have to be accountable for that.
Yes.
You have to make amends for that and then not everybody is strong enough or willing enough to face that truth.
Well, I wrote something about that in the book, and it basically said, some people are afraid to change because they don't know who they'll be once they're healed.
Yes.
And so they're so afraid, like if I make this change, I'm losing the identity that I have lived in for how many years of my
whole life.
And now who am I? And I went through that where it was like, okay, my identity was, basically attached to my father, attached to my husband, attached to my children. I was somebody's daughter. I was somebody's mother. I was somebody's wife. I was somebody's friend. And when I removed everything, who the hell is Rebecca?
But think about it. In our generation, we were raised to believe that we weren't allowed or entitled to our own identity. We were here to serve others, period.
Yes.
If you feel that you're pretty, you're conceited. If you feel proud of yourself, you're arrogant. If you If you speak too loudly, you're bothering other people and disturbing other people. We were taught in our generation that we were not to live out loud. We were not to have opinions. We were not to be here for us. And so now here we are in a time in 2025 where you're like, bitch, I'm writing a book. I'm going to live out loud. And you know what? I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to honor my parents in the way that they deserve to be honored for their own journey, but also recognize what I learned from them that's not good, what I can learn from them now that will help in the future. So we have an opportunity to be pivotal in our children's growth, in our future generations' growth, by not dishonoring our past, not dishonoring our parents or our grandparents, but saying, okay, all right, thank you, Spirit, for bringing me to this point where I can see it and lovingly let them go, lovingly let that past go and do better tomorrow.
Yes.
Right. And by you doing this, by bringing light to that generational trauma, as well as bringing people on the journey to get all the way through all the ugly stuff, but getting to where you are now, where you're healing, you are inspiring others, and you've created a safe space for your own children to do better and be better. That's all we as humans can that's the best we can expect from ourselves, is that we learn, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
And I'm going to do better today, and I'm going to do better for tomorrow.
Yes.
That's all we can do.
You know, and listen, many people will walk this journey, right?
That was channeled, by the way.
I'm sorry?
That was channeled, by the way. Okay.
I know. Many people will walk this journey. Okay. Not everyone will write a book about it. Okay. You know, I knew that the book would be like a giant rock dropped in a pond and it'll ripple across. Okay. But many people will walk this journey. Doesn't mean you're going to write a book. Doesn't mean you're going to have a platform, whatever, but you still are that rock in the pond. And the first people you will affect are those closest to you.
You're that drop that just ripples out.
Yes. You know,
you have a choice whether you're going to be a big wave, if it's a gentle ripple. You have a choice what that ripple looks like.
Listen, I'm very, very naked in this book. And it's funny because the day before, the publisher let me know that, you know, and actually in about 2 weeks, it'll be on Barnes and Noble too. So I'm so excited. But
I'm coming to a book signing.
You know, but I literally was about to take a sip of my morning coffee, and I heard like a chorus of my guides say, "Are you ready for this?" And I went, well, it's a little late now.
Am I?
It's a little late now. Am I? What does this mean?
Right.
And you know, the things that I'd seen and you know, and I have had people, you know, give me readings and, you know, and it's all been very, very positive. But
I'm one of them.
I know. Oh my goodness. You know, it's funny. I have a clip of a video that I was doing during a live where I was talking about how you told me about the book like a few years ago. You know, I should clip that and put it up and tag you in it. But I also know that I'm not done. There are certain, and it's funny because we start in the center, right? And it affects those closest to us, and then it goes out, and then it goes out, and it goes out, right? So my mom, my children, my family, my friends, and then people I don't even know. But there's still people in that circle of family that choices are going to be made. Are they going to look at this and also propel themselves forward? Or is that going to be the end of that? You know, and
right.
And again, it's a choice. It's a choice, you know, but I am really proud of this. I am so excited. I've already started to get some feedback, and all I ask from anybody that reads the book is be kind to yourself when you're reading it. The subject matter can be very, very difficult. And then please, you know, wherever you bought it from, leave me a review.
Well, and I know, like I said, I just got the book like yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever, Tuesday, I think. And I started to read it and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a lot. And I'll pace myself through this book, I'll read it all the way through. Absolutely. But I'll pace myself through it because I think it's going to bring up some stuff. And you know what it might even do is bring up stuff that goes, wow, I actually did that work and this is not triggering anymore.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an opportunity for some reflection and review and kind of also get me in my headspace of being able to watch you not jump off a cliff and survive whatever comes after the book, because that's been my biggest hang up about finishing my book, because it will be a story of like my trauma and how it led me to where I am now.
I don't know if you experience this when you are giving readings, okay? Because, as an empath, not only do we sense emotion, okay, but we tend to draw it out of people.
Yes. Well, because we are a safe space for them.
Yes.
We create a safe space.
And I didn't understand this when I first started doing it. And literally I'd make jokes about it in the book. Like when I first started functioning as a psychic medium, I did the whole, booth at a fair thing, reading cards for $5 and everything. And it's all really ridiculous now, but it was a part of the growing process. Yeah. But I didn't know where I was going with this. And I didn't know, like I felt I had a calling, but I didn't understand what it may have been. And I know that in choosing the name that I chose, Rebecca Healing Medium. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't read tarot cards. I have oracle cards that I absolutely love, but I don't really do it. I don't put a name on any of the services that I may offer. It's just come sit with me for a session, because once I am connected to you and spirit steps in, whatever you need, whatever balm you need is what's going to come in. It may be a psychic reading. It may be, it may be an empathic reading. It may be a medical reading. It may be many, messages coming through, past loved ones stepping forward. I never know. So I don't put a label on it, but what always happens, and what I am so utterly grateful for, is that the person sitting across from me, and most of the time I don't even remember the readings that I do. I'll have somebody come to me like 6 months later and go, oh my God, do you remember? And I'm like,
no. I feel bad because I have regular customers and I truly don't remember. I don't know. I can't remember.
That's why I tell people, just go ahead and record it, because I don't remember, but they remember it, because whatever happened from the moment they sat to the moment they stood, it was healing for them. It was inspiring for them. It was encouraging for them, and they left better than when they walked in. And that's the point of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never want somebody, and, we see them on TikTok. We've seen them in person, where it's like, here's a little info drop and here's a little bomb. I'm going to, and good luck. Spirit may have to bring difficult messages to us. And I've channeled some really difficult messages, but Spirit never just does that and then leaves us with nothing.
Correct.
And leaves us confused or with more questions than when we first sat across, from that reader,
Spirit will give them a path of healing. They'll present a path that they can choose to take.
They can choose to take. And, and I would say it's comfort, encouragement, instruction, that's usually what will come through. And I've done and here I am on TikTok and everything, and people know, the questions will start rolling up, and and it'll be, here's the answer to that question, and somebody go, well, it's a yes, no, it's not a yes, no. Yes. However, spirit wants you to know, or no, but spirit wants you to know this, it's never just yes, no, give me $5.
Right. Ever. Like
Ever.
even with, in doing tarot, I'll do like, okay, we can do a yes, no question. But even then the cards have meaning.
That's
and
right.
Like if I do 3 cards for a yes, no question, then I'm going to go, okay, well, right side up, upside down, right side up. This is what this means. And this is the message.
Yes.
And this is why they're saying no.
Yeah.
But also I'm going to encourage you and try to educate you on how to ask a better open-ended question rather than yes, no. That's a whole other, but that's the teacher in me. That's truly the teacher in me. I'm like, okay, so I hear what you're asking. So let's maybe change that question to something more open-ended. So instead of asking, will I marry Joey? It will be, what can I do to empower myself to find the best soul match possible for my future? Yes. And how is Joey going to be a part of that journey? Yeah. That's how I roll.
Yeah.
It always smile. Now, sometimes I'm not. I'm like, why? Why are you asking that question? Yeah. Why are you giving Joey that?
It's so funny. Many times I've had people pop into my room. Is my husband cheating on me?
If you're asking that question,
actually several times it was no, but spirit wants to talk about the issues you have with your fears and your self-esteem and what you're feeling right now and how you're projecting that onto your husband, and that you're actually spirit is showing me you're with this amazing man who has a tremendous amount of patience with you. But when he's disappearing, he's literally going to recharge because,
and there are some times, however, that you go, absolutely tune into your intuition on that.
Yeah. And it'll be, honey, if you're asking me that, what do you think? What do you think? I just can't stand the am I pregnant questions. Please go buy a test. I don't know.
There's so many resources. Also, it's okay if you wait the couple of weeks to see if your period shows up. Just throw that out there.
I know.
All right. But maybe it's because we are in our 50s and we're like, time is irrelevant.
Time is irrelevant. Time means absolutely nothing. Right now, I'm tending bar in, some little town that doesn't even exist anymore in Scotland. Okay. I mean, right now, I'm a courtesan in the French court. Okay. Right now, I'm actually a warrior in Germania. Okay. Because time is irrelevant.
Time is relevant. We got all things. We are, our souls are.
I'm a caveman with cold balls. That was our first trip. It always comes into my head because it was so amazing. It was so overwhelming. And I was like, what is this?
What is this? Why am I cold right there?
Yeah. And I literally sat with it for a moment. So this is what it feels like. I mean,
and there's got to be truth to it because there's no way we could actually know what that feels like, but somehow we know what that feels like.
Yes.
What is this?
What is this?
Oh, that's why I love past life regression, for people to go on that journey and doing that hypnosis. And I love going on the journey with them because all the realizations that they have and the connections they make, and more so than me doing it for them. I love watching them go on the journey because they have those. Why do I feel this? I shouldn't be able to feel this.
Yeah. I wanted to understand some of what I considered my irrational fears. Like, why am I so afraid of this? Why am I afraid of dying in this very particular way?
Now you
I have flashes of fear when I'm stepping off of a sidewalk, even though, the light is green and nothing's coming and it's 2 a.m. and nothing's going to hit me. Oh, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
I was trampled by a horse.
Yeah. Things that I had irrational fears over since doing past life regression and hypnosis, gone. like I don't have those fears anymore. Even the things that I do have rational fears of, like I can understand why I'm afraid in this lifetime, that because of the things that happen.
Yeah.
I don't embody that fear anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And even down to like, I used to fear death and the unknown. After experiencing it in the past life process, going through that transition, I'm like, oh.
Well, you'll read in the book, I had 2 near-death experiences, you know, and after the last one,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid.
I'm not afraid at this
I
point.
was very young when the first one happened. I was 15, but I was 22 when the next one happened. And then actually, and I'm going to tell you something, astral projecting is basically like you're dying, but you're not.
But you're not.
But you're not. You're still connected by that beautiful silver cord. And I love traveling. You know, I love sitting outside of this physical form with my higher self, with my spirit team, and just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
You know, and when I need it, you know, saying to them, can you take me to the halls of healing? Because it's the only place that they can take the living, you know, and to go spend time in the halls of healing and then wake up the next morning and you're like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing. That's another class that I really would love to teach.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. I gotta start.
We did.
We're almost out of time, but I want to thank you for having me on today.
I'm glad it worked out. It was so random. Like a couple of days ago, I'm like, hey, your book's out. Do you want to come on? I have no guests.
Yeah.
For today. So
listen, I'm gonna come visit you. You're gonna through a friend, we're gonna do like a little class together, and I'm gonna do some book signings and everything. And we're gonna bring forward some absolutely amazing messages for people who need it.
I think it'd be fantastic. You're always welcome here in Indiana.
And then you can come and you can spend some time by the shore.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you all for watching and interacting. I know I didn't really interact much with the comments. I was trying to like give shout outs and like things, but it was amazing conversation. And so really quick, one more shout out. We got Healing Becky by Rebecca J. Rowan, new author and psychic medium, and my friend. And I've just enjoyed so much watching you be on this journey, going from just a cool person I met on TikTok that we bond over things to.
Yeah, you've been there from almost the beginning.
From the very beginning. Wonderful. Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on. And as we sign off, I'm going to have you hang on here, Rebecca, so we can chat. But thank you all for coming in, and thank you, Yessie, for being an awesome moderator. Love you, appreciate you. Thank you all for watching and tuning in. All right, next week, really quick, I got to give the shout out.
Yes,
I have the amazing Meredith Willis, Meredith with a Y. She's also an author. But she has her own podcast, Meredith with a Y. She's fantastic. Also, just another cool Gen X lady. You know, I love. Are you familiar with her?
No, I'm not.
Oh
so I'll be listening in next Thursday.
Yeah, for sure. You got to go check her out. She's our people.
I love that.
She's our people. I'm telling you. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much, and we will see you soon.